Hello and welcome. This is my CIT 412 final presentation, and today I'll be going over some of my favorite topics I've discovered recently. There have been a lot of different subjects I've liked over the course of this class, and I've really enjoyed a whole lot of them. But if I had to narrow it down, I'd say these right here are probably four of my favorite. And I've always been really into hardware and software both, but I've also picked up cybersecurity in the recent semester, and I think it's another really cool thing to get into. So today we're going to be going over hardware installation, networking, cloud computing, and system security. So starting off, we're going to start taking a look at the system hardware, which has always been something that's actually fascinated me since I was a kid. So the hardware is the actual physical components that make up the actual computer, and most of these parts are going to be on the motherboard. These parts are what actually make the computer up and allow it to perform just like, kind of like our body lets us do stuff, move around, breathe, and just do everything a human can do. It's the same thing a computer can do. The quality of these parts will actually limit what all the computer can do. Like, we can't fly, but we can run for a mile or so. A computer might be able to run 100 versions of Windows at the same time, but it can run a little bit. And there's a lot of different ways you can actually view the hardware of this, either using built-in settings, commands at the prompt, or just third-party applications. And they'll let you tune your system to favor either like performance or longer battery life, either one. Almost every component you see is going to be classified either as hot plug or cold plug, and what that means is basically you can determine what a hot plug device is if it's something you can plug into your computer while it's still running. Cold plugs that we have to have your computer turned off to install, similar to like operations on a human body. You can be awake to take medicine or have some procedures done to you. Other ones you're going to want to stay asleep for so you don't feel pain or mess something up. And next up we get into networking, which is arguably the biggest concept for computer usage today. Networking is at its concept the interacting with computers or others to send and receive data, which is something that computers excel at and are used for in almost everything we do today. This is done on a massive scale now all around the world. Companies use networking to transmit data to sites and get reports from places all across the country in almost an instant versus what used to take weeks or days through mail. So networks start by assigning whatever is connected to them an IP, which basically defines if you were a customer in line at a coffee shop, you'd have your own IP for your order of coffee. And IPs are assigned to either IPv4 or IPv6, but 6 is becoming more common today as it's more secure and any network's going to want max security. Every network is also going to have somebody to administrate it or manage it because there's a whole lot of suspicious activity that can go on across networks anywhere you go from either a coffee shop or company data on a site. Attackers target networks more than almost anything else. So you're going to get somebody to watch that and just look out for any leaks or ports open. And of course, you're going to want to actually be able to troubleshoot it yourself because there's a lot of problems that networks can have that you need to be able to fix and keep up and running. And there's a ton of ways you can manage a network, but the most common way is just using built-in applications and with command prompts, which allow you to run almost anything and troubleshoot and fix 90% of the problems you're going to come across. And every network is going to be assigned to a net host and a host ID, which really just depends on the subnet mask and the network prefixes. IPv4 or IPv6 will be more dependent on the actual prefix, whereas the subnet mask is more present on IPv6. Another concept I really like and enjoy using is cloud computing, which is the process of performing tasks over a network that's not just on a single machine. Like, you could perform something on a different computer that's way away on the other side of the factory from another computer that has a link installed on it. Or you can run a bunch of different tasks across a whole network of computers using virtualization, which gets a lot of processes done in what would take you probably hours versus just a few minutes. And that's just one reason why it's become really popular across basically almost every industry because they're just so handy to have and save a ton of time. Now, this is all done through virtualization and virtual machines, which basically enables the system to run another system. Kind of like think of putting a folder inside a folder, except now you're going to be putting an operating system on another operating system. But there's a ton of uses for cloud computing, but some of the most handy are like running other versions of operating systems on another computer. Like, I myself have Windows 10 installed on my computer, but actually Windows 11 installed, but it's fun to just go back and you can see all the processes that perform from the other version of Windows, and it's basically the same thing. And companies that use this to run like other versions of operating systems they don't really have or might not have installed, but they might have it in a different computer, which they don't have access to immediately. But another thing that companies like to use it for is to create virtual storage, which is handy for managing like groups of people, maybe using the same network. So like one person doesn't use up the whole group storage limit. But of course, they're not like a perfect solution or anything, because what you run is going to depend on what your host system can handle. Like, you can't run a more advanced operating system on a computer that doesn't have maybe enough RAM or the hardware for it. Or you might have in a workplace certain policies enabled where a network administrator doesn't let you install or run certain systems on a computer. And then we take a look at system security, which is something I've recently become interested in over the last 2 semesters. Of course, anytime you have something valuable, you're going to want to keep it safe, which is where system security comes into play. And this takes place almost every level of environment you can think of. There's common network attacks, which is really common in today's society, whether you try to break into a network and steal data virtually. Then there's also, as you've probably seen, phishing attempts where a hacker sends out some kind of email asking you for your address or your account number or your password to try to break into your account that way. And then there's stuff that's common as maybe somebody walking by your desk and looking at your password you have written down on a sticky note, and then next thing you know, you have your account hacked the next day. There's practically an unlimited threats you could deal with, and it's impossible to deal with all of them, but there are a bunch of ways you can deal with the most common ones. How most people do it, or companies do, is they have a root user or an administrator that has pretty much complete access to everything on a computer. And there's also likely going to be a lot of other users on that computer which are going to try to want to use certain applications or have files. And the best thing to do in that situation is to create group policies which will limit their access. What most companies do is they'll create a policy depending on groups. So like maybe accounting, HR, finances, or human resources, they'll each have their own account created and assigned to a policy. So let's say you were in accounting, you might only have access to accounting or maybe sales files, but if you try to go into human resources or another group's files, it'll block you and you won't be able to access that. And this is a good practice that keeps like inter-network attacks from happening, or intentionally or unintentionally, where an employee might want to sabotage data or leak it to other parts of the department that shouldn't have access to it. And since networks exchange so much information on such a rapid amount of time and have so much stuff going on at once, this makes them a prime target for hackers to try to go after, as you probably see on the news all the time. And there's a bunch of different ways you can go after trying to stop an attack, depending on what the attack is, but some of the best things you can do as an administrator is to just monitor your network and look for any kind of suspicious activity that you know shouldn't be there, and then maybe try to trace it and eliminate the threat if you can find out where it is, if it's in your company or if it's on the outside the perimeter or if it's a third party trying to get into your account. Try to trace that and go after them. And it's also a good idea to just look at any ports that's open on your network and close them, because those risk a vulnerability to your network that hackers can easily use to get in. So it's a good idea to just keep any port you don't need closed. And so that about wraps up everything I've found interesting this last half of the semester. It's been a very fun class so far, and I've enjoyed almost everything I've learned in it, but there are a few of my favorites. And of course, hardware has been my passion for a long time, and I still think it is. And I'm still going to try to look at stuff that makes up your computer and try to make it better. Keep in mind that a computer can only do what it can do. Like, we can't fly, but we can run 10 miles maybe. And a computer might not be able to run maybe Call of Duty on the highest settings, but it can run Word on almost any system you find and perform most office tasks daily. I've also gotten into networking quite a bit this semester. I think it's a pretty nice concept, and of course it's a widely used one, and I still want to get into that, because that's probably going to grow exponentially in the next 2 to 3 years, and it's never going to stop. And cloud computing is the other thing I've been interested in this semester, which I've actually used for quite a while. Like, I used to connect to 3D printers on campus and then print stuff out there. And I right now have a Windows 10 download on my computer for another class, even though I have Windows 11. But it's fun to just play with a little bit and see if I can still use that. And of course, as I said, security in general is important for anything valuable, but cybersecurity especially today is peak, and it needs to be on top to stop any kind of hackers from getting all your data, which we see on the news almost every day. There's a new company that's been leaked, or passwords have been leaked, and everybody's losing their account. Especially around right now, like Black Friday, people are vulnerable to get their accounts locked or their information leaked on a fake website or transaction sniffing. But anyways, this has been a very interesting class, and I look forward to seeing part 2 of it. Thank you for listening.